Wow. All right. I think I'm here. I think I'm live after all of that. Okay. Can hopefully everybody can hear me this time, can see me this time. Can I get a thumbs up if you can hear me and see me? A few people from being here. What's up, Brown Dwarf? Thank you. Jessica said you were asking if I was all right. I could say, no, not really. I think I'm like technologically impaired or something weird like that. So I apologize to everybody who went to the other stream and my browser went and now I know what to do next time to avoid that. I think I've worked that part out. Although it was a very painful experience as usual. You know what they say: you trip, you have to get up again. So I appreciate everybody that's here, and let some people check in here because I know that was a big hassle. And I appreciate the people that wasted 30 minutes of their day for me. So I apologize for that. Amari, welcome. Jonaside, Like and Claw, welcome. Thanks, Jessica. Jessica got me on here again, everybody. I did not do that alone. So thank you, Jessica. Really appreciate it. I am welcome. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure I get to see everybody here. Hex Knight, thank you for coming. Oh, very cool. Very cool. Duchess of Wisdom, thank you for being here. I like that. Joyce, thank you for being here. Omega, thanks for coming. Aussie Ange, thank you. Thank you for being here, Ange. Thank you. It's always good to communicate with you. Matthew, thank you for coming, man. You're the first person here that I knew that the stream actually went through. Thank you. So anyway, I'm just letting people check in and we'll go ahead and get started with the topic here in just a second. So, kind of just going to this. This is one of those topics that I've been talking about for quite a while. And it doesn't, sometimes I think it might rub people the wrong way, things like that. But it's a topic that really needs to be addressed. And this stream here, this live, is a direct result of an interview I did with Jimmy Church on Thursday on the 4th. Okay. And it was I thought it was going to be more of a contactee thing you want to talk about, but he's really cool. He's a good interviewer and it went a different way. And I give Jimmy much credit in that when I first met him, all right, it was at the Assetti Ranch in 2017, the second year I spoke there. And he was the first person up to the podium to start asking me about his questions were, you're black and you're being open by being a contactee. I might know a black contactee and they don't seem to talk as much, and the cultural differences. He was one to address it and ask about it. And it really caught me off guard. And there were good questions, and then we went outside and talked for a while, and I wound up being on his Fade to Black show. Contrary to everybody's thought that was my first time on there, it was not. That was probably my 5th time. And I was also on Coast to Coast with him also. I try to kind of not tell people that I do have a history that exists, even predates when I was working with Jessica. We've done so much work together. It was beautiful. But I have a history that predates that, other people I've worked with and done a lot of stuff with. And I've done a lot of interviews. And which has been a blessing. I can't believe anybody would ever listen to anything. But anyway, so it's cool. But anyway, that's not the first time I've been on there. So the first time I was on there, the first thing he wants to address is the racial thing and how there's really no black people at the conferences hardly. And we don't hear about black extraterrestrials and all the stuff I talk about. And, and just like when we start dealing with the contact scenario, we don't have the full picture because of the cultural differences, the racial differences. We're not getting them. And it's like the whole thing that has to do with melanin is not incorporated into the rings of ufology and contact whatsoever. I mean, we hear about the tall whites all the time. In fact, it gets shoved down our throats ad nauseum. Okay. But how often do you hear about the tall melanin dominants, the tall blacks? And there are those. Something beyond Norman Bergen when he sat up there and said, because it was late. So you mean they were brown? No, they were black. I mean, but he described them being tall. And that, one thing we'll go into too is also a couple of the experiences, what Jimmy had talked about And then also some of the people that I've been blessed enough to communicate with me that have had experiences with melanin dominant extraterrestrials. And that in a way is when I put part of this title, race relations, in terms of when you look at like Star Trek, especially the original, I've said a lot of times on the bridge what Gene Roddenberry was trying to show. And if anybody that saw the original series cartoon that didn't run that long, they actually had a lot of non-humans on the bridge then, like a feline, an octopus, amphibious type being or something. He's trying to show that as a type 1 civilization, we really do come together. And we're getting a lot better now, but we've got a long way to go. My father was actually, where I come from, he's a legend in terms of he was the first, the head leading scorer, but he did a lot of things, places he couldn't play. And he's the first black to play in some of these arenas. He took a lot of heat and stuff, a lot of abuse, and he still walks this world. So when you start dealing with that, and that generation has not fully died out yet, and it was not all right. And some of them will tell you that being alive, like in the 40s and 50s, was a really hard time to be alive. Horrible as when it comes to racial equality, it was a really rough time, especially when you go before rights and everything. So we're not all healed on that already. And it sometimes becomes annoying. People, color has no place in all of this. I'm colorblind, all that stuff. Come on. Yes, it does. There's no reason that, somebody like me would feel uncomfortable at one of those conferences because there are no black people, no ethnic people there. It's changing now. Okay. It's not like that as much now. I'm not saying I didn't have good experiences, but I'm saying we have to incorporate more and find out more. What are maybe the little subtle differences in contact that we're having, due to cultural differences, due to melanin differences, and who were the beings that were melanin dominant that have been here. So those are some of the things we'll talk about, but we'll start off with what Jimmy was saying. All right. Now I'm gonna check over here in the chat a little bit because I'm starting to go, and this time I'm gonna make this into the goal is 90 minutes. Okay, I've got quite a few pictures, but since I'm on this different browser, I don't know if I'll be able to show them like I normally would, but I'll try it later. And let's see. Kyle Smith, thanks for being here, man. I always appreciate your support. You've been very supportive for a while. Ossie Haynes, what's up? Dude, cool. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is great. Okay. So back to the Jimmy thing. Okay. Where this went was he started telling me during this live, and I put the live I also put it at the end of the video, also on YouTube thing, but I put it in the chat just before I logged on. It's a video, like I said, interview we did a couple of days ago, and he started saying during it that he had gotten a regression done. And I think it's by Laura Tyne, I think her name is. I don't know her, but I think it's he said that he had got a regression. I think it was her he got done, and how quickly he went under and everything. And that he had an experience with these black extraterrestrials on some sort of craft. And they're looking at him, and he's kind of interacting with them. And I put that up so everybody can kind of listen to his description of it. I don't want to distort it, but he described them as having these oval type shape of heads, and also like extremely, was it long arms with a different type of a torso. He described them to a way that you'll see. I asked him, I said, well, could they pass down here as walking like in a population? Could they pass? He was like, no, they would stand out like a sore thumb type of thing. So this is very interesting. And he got this regression done. And what this winds up being tied to is it's so interesting because before this, him and I we're talking about Artron energy. Excuse me, those of you that have actually listened to me for a while, excuse me, that's a term I stole from Doctor Who that describes a type of energy you get when you go through a vortex or a wormhole, a black hole, and it irradiates your cells with some type of energy. Or in the case in reality, when you're around some of these beings, you get irradiated when you're in their biofield, you get irradiated with some type of a high energy, plasma. I don't know what it is exactly, but it's like a high pranic type of energy or something. And I can detect it on other experiencers. I can feel it when I'm in their presence a lot of time. And Jimmy's like, did you feel that on me? And I was honest. I was like, man, at first I thought she's kind of rude. So I got to know you. And then when I got in your energy field and what you were talking about, yeah, I knew you'd seen something happened to you. But this instance, what came up in his regression, oddly enough, is a UFO he saw when he was with Billy Carson. Okay, so he's with Billy Carson. They seen this UFO, but Jimmy had an experience during that time. And it's very chronologically effective that before that I was mentioning to him that a type of contact that happens right now, it happens like when you're dealing with beings from a different vibration, a faster vibration, a faster frequency, whatever you want to call it. But when you start dealing with them, the information transfer is like instantaneous on the levels of what we call theta, delta, the superconscious level, the subconscious levels. That's where it happens. And and then like you may, and I was mentioning that it's always the people that come up to me at those conferences and go, oh, I'm really into this stuff, but I haven't had experiences like you, and yada yada. And I'll be like, I'm thinking like they have that Artron energy on them. And I'll ask them, have you seen a UFO before? They'll be, yeah, a couple of times. And one of the times, like maybe there were other people there that couldn't seem to see it. Maybe one or two people, but everybody else going, where are you? Right there, right there. It only lasts for a second. A couple of seconds, and it's over. And they'd be like, actually, yeah, that has happened to me. And it turns out a few days later, they didn't analyze that they might be having odd dreams. A few days later, dreams of being somewhere odd, different, being around beings that aren't normal, getting information, that type of a thing, because there's a time lag between what is observed with the physical senses and is processed consciously and through the awareness. There's a time lag. Okay. So that's what happened to him. To where he was mentioning that, asking like Billy Carson some questions of how he was acting during when they saw this thing, whatever happened. That's all on that interview. And I advise everybody to go back and look to it. Now, look, of course, look, I'm not a big fan, okay, of that individual, but based on the fact that he is melanin dominant and Jimmy had a melanin dominant being contact experience, I want to fully acknowledge. Okay. It's not about me, but I just want to acknowledge that. So, and I think it's important. I think it's important for people to hear that, him and I talking about that and keeping it 100. And I've been blessed enough to have a lot of people now that have come forward to me privately, and tell me that, hey, I've experienced a black extraterrestrial. And I like it that you talk about that. Like I'll give you an example. Let's just talk about a few of these. Okay. One of them would be anybody that knows Matthew Morning. Okay, cool cat. I've met him about probably 3 or more times at some of these conferences. Him and his wife, they're both very, very cool people. And to be honest with you, when I went to that conference, it was the first one I met Matthew at was Starseed Adventures in Cocoa Beach, Florida, right after COVID was over. It was the first one that was done after COVID, at least that I went to. And he runs, and I was kind of under the pretense that probably he didn't care for me much. I thought Tony Rodriguez probably didn't care for me much. That's based on, it seemed like people were avoiding me sometimes in these circles and these things. And some of that may be perceived paranoia on my own. I got my own issues, okay? But that was not the case at all. My experience with Tony was nothing like that. And when I met Matthew actually walks up to me real quick. He goes, man, I'm kind of the word he said, I'm kind of a fan of yours, man. I said, a fan? He goes, well, man, you talk about black extraterrestrials. And he said, man, I had an experience with one. And he started telling me this experience about one of these beings manifesting around him when I can't remember what he said he was doing. That's something that Matthew have to explain. I don't want to quote other people's stories, but it was so cool that at that conference, Tyler, Journey to Truth, was there. And I had mentioned it to Tyler. I said, man, Matthew's got this incredible story about a black extraterrestrial. And Tyler's like, man, we should do a show about it. And right after that conference was over, we had done a show. I know that they were being harassed by YouTube and others or something, but that video, they might still have it. I'll try to ask Tyler. He just hit me up the other day about James Rake's death. So he invited me to be a part of that panel they did, but I actually had something I was doing. I couldn't be on there. I was honored to be asked. Anyway, going back that, but Matthew had described, and here's what's worth mentioning. Okay, Matthew had mentioned a type of melanin dominant extraterrestrial that's taller. I think he might have said they had the triangles on their foreheads. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, but I've heard others that have described this to me. And I think he might have described a type of a dance and some things that were going on with this contact experience that reminds me of one of the species of melanin dominant extraterrestrials is the black praying mantis hybrids. Okay, and when you look at the ecosystem here on Earth, please check out the black mantis, the black praying mantis. We don't see much about that. No one talks about that. There is a species. And when we start dealing with these species like that might come from dark matter, okay, from dark energy, that type of a realm. So we don't know much about that. When you start dealing with that, you deal with perhaps species like that. But the black praying mantis is another type of hybrid. And I've talked about them for some time now, all right, since the beginning of my coming forward. And as it was understood to me, okay, is that they have these extra joints, okay, a joint like extra joint in the here, extra joint in the leg, and their necks are different, longer at least. And when you meet them, they begin doing this dance. It's a type of a dance that's almost it's almost trancing in a way. And it's the way that you almost want to try to do it too. But we don't have the movements. We can't do it based on our body parts. Okay, not what they're doing. But actually, they'll do this dance in front of you for like 30 minutes or more, an hour. But it's their way of introducing and saying hello and establishing communication. Okay, now a picture. I am going to try to bring up a picture because this takes us into one of the people that I mentioned. We're going to talk about people that have become known publicly for talking about having extraterrestrials with, I'm going to call them BETs, black extraterrestrials, because I always used to watch BET, especially when Dottie Simpson was on there. Y'all remember that. Anyway, but so BETs, all right? And one of the people that claims such, and is a really good story that you might be familiar with, is Daniel Kell. Excuse me. And Daniel Kell wrote a book called Double Trip. And I've got some pictures. So let's see. Okay, now here comes where can B pull it off? Can he pull it off? Okay. All right. I think I might be able to pull this off, everybody. I'm getting close. Bear with me. It's a little different on this one. Okay, let's try this. Okay, that was difficult, but I think I. Oh man, that was something like pulling teeth. Damn. Was it Farouk from WWE? Damn. Anyway, all right, listen. This is one of the illustrations from Daniel Kell, okay, and the book Double Trip. Okay, now this is something here that I want to bring up when it comes to this species and these brothers. All right. I did a video in 2019 when I was at the Assetti Ranch with Corey Good and this Bogan, Crook. But I did one with Corey Good and this other individual. And this was actually about melanin dominant extraterrestrials. And I've said it before, when I met him, okay, that's first I got when Corey wanted, we first met, he wanted to hug me. I don't really, unless you're a beautiful woman, I'm not exactly the hugging type. But I would let him go ahead and do it because I want to get a read on him. And bottom line, no matter what, I didn't like the bureaucracy and stuff that surrounded him, but I got Artron energy off him. He either been on board a craft or been around some beings. Something's happened to the cat. And look, y'all, I had to accept that first before the bureaucracy. Okay, so my very next thing to him is, man, I've seen of your testimony is that you said you have met extraterrestrials, that black extraterrestrials that are not from our solar system. Tell me all about it. and that ends in us doing that video, standing by that bridge out there. Okay, and one of the beings he had talked about was these beings that he called now he calls them Zulu, but he didn't have a name for them then. But he's describing a type of being that was capable, these brothers, this black race that was capable of harnessing the black holes attached to the individual cells of the body and use that for interstellar transport, teleportation. And in that way, without needing technology, that they were like, unconquerable. And then now he calls them Zulus. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing that. I'm gonna go to another one. Since we're okay, I think you're back to just me now. I'm gonna show you another one where we're still cooking with that. All right, because I think maybe addressing the Daniel Kell thing is important, because it seems like his book didn't make a lot of circulation. Didn't get a lot of circulation, and I'd only seen one of them like an online deal. Sorry, everybody. I know it's a little slower than normal, but I'll get it there for us. All right. So I think this is important. This is another illustration from Daniel Kell in the book Double Trip. All right, and he was talking about how much instant, and this is something I always look for commonalities in my own experiences with those that others that are having them. Okay, and one is the fact that when you're in the presence of one of these non-humans, okay, you get it's not just telepathy, it's like telethought transfer. It comes with pictures, images, and emotions, and it's a little more intense than what we do as people when we start trying to practice telepathy. We'll pick some stuff up, but this is a different transfer of information to where it can be a little bit overwhelming. And as I mentioned before, when dealing with a being like Yandar Xandar, that insectoid that I've showed people before, when I was in his presence on board that craft, he was answering my questions telepathically and with visions and all sorts of stuff before I could form the questions fully in my mind. And it's like he was a couple seconds ahead of me for a while, and it was uncomfortable. It wasn't an assault, okay, but it was just such an advanced way of communication that we're obviously capable of, but our species doesn't use our telepathy enough, use our telethought transfer enough to really have that, happen in that effect, and it does. And you know why? Because when you can do this and have this type of a telethought transfer, it's very hard to lie. I did that thing about serial killers recently. I'm sorry, serial unalivers. Sorry, entertainment only purposes. And how that's a disease that spreads, and how there are many like when one gets caught, you've got like 3 or 4 or 5 others that will try to start their careers. Okay, and it spreads in that way. But if you have individuals like that, and before these people start their deal, they'll do what the guy that was around my town that was tearing people up, saying, "Oh, I'm trolling." But that trolling involves all these visions of unaliving people. Okay, and if you have a civilization like this, those people are going to stand out like a sore thumb, because they can't hide the thoughts. And they're going to be an immediate rehabilitation of some type. And I think that's why our society, this is why this type of communication that those of us that are contactees have had is really, let us say subdued, discouraged by all means. Anyway, back to these beings. This is just a deal here, and I thought that's worth sharing. Okay, I've got one more picture concerning him. But download, we'll see. I don't think I did, but I'll put it up here. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, I didn't have that one downloaded because I've had to do everything over again, but we're still going to get it. And it's worth taking a second more. Sometimes these illustrations do more than just my black ass up here babbling. So, um, okay. Also from his book, he said that this was a contraption that apparently, I believe, was on their planet, but it was also a mode of propulsion for the ship that they were on board. He said this was like the engine type of component. And to me, I want to say maybe he called it was it a pyramid machine or something like that? But it's dealing with, I think, some type of a life energy. I think it's just worth sharing that. And this kind of, for me, took me into books like The Secret Waters of the Great Pyramid by Abdul Mumin. And I don't know if that's still in print, but he talked a lot about how actually the pyramids were used to pull water from the artesian well underneath the ground there and purify, and also used as not just when the Nile wasn't inundating, but also as a life energy source. And he talked about how the capstone being like there another one up there, and the capstone, Pharaoh would get in the capstone for like so many days, and when they got lowered back down, they'd be like years younger, and it had something to do mathematically with the same reason that razor blades get sharp again inside those pyramid things. When you know I'm talking about those pyramid sharpeners, it's something about the angles and things of that nature. You know, it's interesting, similar to like how I can tell you like the instruments that Jessica saw making the Great Pyramids. She saw some black boxes and sound technology that they were using. That also has something to do with, and I've always known this from past life. I think, remember, that it also has something to do mathematically with the reason why a cube floats in water. A sugar cube floats in water. It's got something mathematically and chemical composition similar to that. They're turning mathematically that into more. Anyway, that goes beyond me. That's for those of you that are geospecialist engineers, and it goes way beyond me. Unlike some people, I know when to keep my lane because I easily get burned on that. But anyway, this is just something very interesting that you don't hear commonly that I thought was worth sharing. Okay. And one last Daniel Kell picture, and then we'll move on. Okay. But it's good because I don't think that man really has got the credit that he probably deserved. That's a very interesting account he had talked about. He gave an illustration of another being, and it's this being. This one, I don't know if it's necessarily melanin dominant, but it just interesting illustration, and I think it's taken us more to a different type of humanoid again. There you go. Again, that's from Double Trip. And I've also seen illustrations of some types of Andromedans that look like this. Extremely large humanoid eyes. And when as I bring up Andromeda also, that goes into another type of melanin dominant black extraterrestrial that would be the Andromedan women. They're these dreadlock women. They're melanin dominant, but they're like androgynous. All right, and meaning that they're like hermaphrodites to a degree. I guess you say hermaphrodites, androgynous, but they're actually supposed to be represented quite a bit in like legends like Wonder Woman and stuff like that. Let me hold off on that. I'll talk about that in a second. Anyway, I can feel some of y'all probably resonate with this, but this is one of the beings he'd encounter. And this is one of the ones that could move around down here with us, and I think the eyes are very noteworthy. For some reason, it makes me think about the tumor seal with the human eyes. I don't know why, it just does. Anyway, just wanted to show you that one. All right. Now, since we're on picks, I might as well struggle as I am and bring up another contactee that is definitely worth talking about. Ooh, 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 ooh. Oh boy, I didn't pull that one up either, but we'll get it here. All right. It's this individual here. If I can get it up, good Lord. Here we go. I'm sure some of you have probably heard about this guy. Michael or Michel, however you say it, Desmarquet. Okay, and this was the book that he talks about, the Thanaba prophecy. Okay, and he talks about going to, I think it's a couple planets in the constellation Centaurus. All right, and this ship that takes them there are these beings that he calls Bacteranians. And these Bacteranians, at first, he thinks he's on a ship of like all women. And but point being, but a lot of them were, he described them as being melanin dominant too, like different races, but like they're being over a majority of the inhabited worlds there being melanin dominant. That's kind of goes into that. And he went into some other things in some other books, like some kind of doomsday predictions and some things about craft that were almost interesting, spherical. In fact, let's just keep going on with him. Yeah, I'll show you the others that I have concerning him. Let's get that out of the way. Um, yeah, here we go. Okay. This is his image of one of these Bacteranians. He describes some of them as them being somewhat melanin dominant. And the thing is, he's on this ship, and he asked him eventually, they're taking him to his planet. He asked him, is your whole race women? Because he didn't see any male on this craft. And I guess she looks at him and says, we have no women here. And at that point, he starts really kind of examining them and noticing that some of them almost, he thought they're all women, but they have like, Adam's apples, some of them. It's that old trick that Bruce Wayne used to do to expose the Catwoman on a train, walk around looking up. And when everybody looks up, he's looking to see who didn't have an Adam's apple. She might be dressed like a woman, or dressed like a man. That's how he busted her. Anyway, sorry, that's just something geeky I had to throw in for y'all. Anyway, but that's these. So he noticed that they had these Adam's apples, some of them, and their shoulder structure was more man-like. And he started noticing that they did have these male traits. And what it is, they were a race of like androgynous hermaphrodites. So they're one sex. That's what they were. And it's said that they're represented like in entertainment, something like the Amazon women. Okay, and the Amazon women from Wonder Woman, that was quote unquote an island of like all women to a degree, but something like that, and this carries us over into what I was saying about the Andromedans, these female Andromedans. And that's somebody I used to work with before. Talks about, I'm going to say her name, but she talks about them quite a bit. All right, and what they're dread-like, these warriors that are dreadlocked. And I had talked to somebody who said that there's that one brother. Actually, I talked to that one brother. What was his name? 18 Signs of Astrology, I think was his name. He disappeared for a while, and then when he reappeared, he was like wearing these sunglasses, and he took them off, and he had this black eye, and he was saying that these women got him and beat him up. I've heard other stories about that too, and they're like these 8-foot tall black women with these dreadlocks that were some type of warriors. but they're supposedly like these species here. They're hermaphrodite androgynous. Okay, and there's also to be represented in the entertainment by the dreadlocks on the um on the Predator, and also when you look at Guinan had the dreadlocks. That is the Andromedas I'm speaking to here, and also when you look at Michonne from The Walking Dead, dreadlocks with the sword. She's a warrior. Okay, I mean it goes again and again. There's supposed to be representations of these Andromedan females within our entertainment. I think that's really fascinating. There's supposed to be a connection with them and the Queen of Sheba and those that have the white hair. That's supposed to be an Andromedan quality that was inbred with the Mayans too. Okay, and in that way, they're represented in the entertainment like by Storm. Storm had the gray hair. You know what I mean? I think that's real interesting when we start going to things like that. But that's the correlation between these Bactrianians and the Andromedan females, just that they're supposed to be these androgynous cultures of a part. So I thought that's worth mentioning, definitely. But he got quite a bit of knowledge there, quite a bit of stuff. He had given some other things that were like kind of seemed like almost doomsday type of predictions to me and stuff like that. I might have put one of those up. I might not have. No, it appears like I didn't. Anyway, it was worth checking out that book and what he's saying and the beings that he encountered. Okay, and as he describes the civilization there and what it was like to be there and live there. Now, look, me personally, some part of the accounts I have problems with because I'm not so convinced that when we go to these other planets we can live very long, or even on board these craft. And look, I can only base that on my personal experiences. Okay, not that doesn't mean it runs the gamut. Somebody else I want to bring up here. Okay, another contactee experiencer that probably you would not have heard of. You might have. I want to make sure that there's some information. I've interacted with this individual a few times. And right here, boom. Okay, this is a lady by the name of Shirlene Wallace. And her and her sister, the twins, they're also known as the UFO twins. They wrote this book, From the Motherland to the Mothership. Now, interestingly enough, I've had the pleasure of interacting with Shirlene a couple of times now. One is she used to live in my hometown for quite a while. And she was, or I think maybe her sister was connected to one of my close cousins, like my second cousin. And so there's a lot of it's really cool in that way. And also she was serving on board this panel that's this John Mack Institute for Experiencer People of Color, and it's a panel I'm on board founded by our friend Charlie and his mother Catherine. But she's a part of that, and it's just giving a chance for melanin dominant people to speak out about the type of contact we have in a different free type of environment, and kind of injecting that into the mainstream, which I think is extremely important. And Shirlene is a part of that. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Back to the deal. And she had especially reached out to me when I had done a video with this crook cat about the Pleiadians, and that the Raven tribe, and I think there's some others that say that there's some relics they have that say they're seeded here from the Pleiades, and that the first Pleiadians here were black because they look identical to them. Okay, so I think that says a lot, but we never hear about that. And she had reached out to me after that video, and we got to talking a little bit. Now, what's interesting about her experience, they've had a few with quite a few different beings, but for this one, we'll quite talk about. She said that they'd been on Mars. She'd been to Mars, and then on Mars there were black people there, but also like black grays there, like little beings that look kind of like grays, but they were black. They're melanin dominant. Okay. And she talked a lot about Mars. It's quite interesting. Okay. So definitely a book worth getting. And I've not talked to her for a little while now. I'm not seeing her in the groups lately, so I hope she's doing well. But very, very cool in that way. And I think it's something to look at. You know, they got kind of popular, and then they did this interview. I think it was some cat from Atlanta, some radio station in Atlanta. And man, that cat was a complete ass to them, man. And he was attacking them, attacking their experiences. And then the people that were calling in were doing it too. And I think maybe they stopped speaking out as much as they were after that. You know, and it's horrible when that happens. That's happened to me before, so it's never a fun, experience. But really cool in that way. And just I want to put that out there because these are melanin dominant authors talking about melanin dominant beings on Mars. And just for reference on Mars, okay, we're going to go a little bit further with the Mars thing. And I hope Jessica's still here because this is going to tie in with her. I hope I haven't completely lost everybody by now. I didn't pull that one up, but I will. Hold on. There it is. Okay, I think you all will find this one extremely interesting. And this will take into somebody else that I was going to address too. So it'll be good we do this. This is actually working out good. I hope everybody, I'm not boring you too much, but I think this is important to show these. Okay, here you go. Boom. All right. This comes from the big head scientist that I believe it's Dr. York or maybe Dr. Valentine. I can't remember that. Sure, I'll get roasted for that. But I think it might be Dr. York. But anyway, he goes by the big head scientist on YouTube. He talks about a lot about Yakab and the inner earth prince and the inner earth ebenoid breakaway civilizations. Okay. Interestingly enough, I know that Yakab is also mentioned, I believe, in Islam also, but he kind of focused on that. And this was one of his videos that really caught my attention. And this is going back over a decade ago. Okay. And this to the transmission he was saying that comes from this being Momar, that's a Moorish Martian, okay, melanin dominant, and it claimed to be from Tau Ceti F. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I think it's Tau Ceti E. And then on Tau Ceti F, that was further away from their sun, were other beings that looked similar but were melanin recessive. Okay. Now here's what he says in this transmission: is that they left Tau Ceti, that from Tau Ceti they also started colonizing Mars, and that they were the beings on Mars, and that the Olmec, the face of Mars is actually connected to them. But in reality, I think that's connected to another melanin dominant species that we know as Olmecs. And Olmecs are also ones that they're supposed to be possibly from, was it Centaurus too? Anyway, but the Olmec, I believe that face on Mars is an Olmec face. Anyway, going back to this, okay? So what I did with my friend Jessica, who's very gracious in doing my blind targets, I wanted to know. So I gave her the blind target of Tau Ceti E. Okay. And something worth mentioning because it connects, excuse me, is I've also given her targets on Mars, 2 of them. Well, actually 4 technically. One of them is the Cydonia, okay, the Cydonia complex, and the other was inside Cydonia complex. Okay, the interior. And another one was what's called the Elysium quadrangle. I gave her the outside of that and the inside. Okay, and I think for Cydonia, I went ahead and put that for what she was seeing. I wanted to be back like about 1 million years or so. What she would see, but what's currently the interior, what's there now. So that was giving us the deal there. Now here's what's fascinating about this. Okay, when she sees Tau Ceti and all the data she had, okay, starts talking about really an exodus A planet that's beautiful, but like is in trouble and an exodus, like it's going through some cataclysm and an exodus to another planet that she didn't know she's describing as actually Mars. But here's what's interesting, everybody. And it's stuff like this you can't make up. When she's describing this destruction of Tau Ceti E that caused these beings to leave, it sounds like she kept saying it's coming from space. It's like they're dropping something on the civilizations there from space. And it almost sounded similar to a nuclear war. Now check it out. These beings came from there and went to Mars. And this takes us into somebody's work I've always been interested in. That's John Brandenburg, who's the plasma physicist. Okay. And he also wrote a book called Death on Mars, based on the Xenon 120, I believe it is, and these other isotopes and things in the atmosphere that can only have been caused from a nuclear devastation, from a nuclear explosion. And he says that he thought they were bombed from space, Mars. So it can't be a coincidence that Jessica was seeing this happen on Tau Ceti. Then they came to Mars and did the same BS, man. Okay, and something else about these beings here. They're supposed to be represented in our entertainment as Marvin the Martian, okay? And you know, Marvin the Martian is completely melanin dominant. And something else about, I was teasing Jessica on her show about this, that you remember, technically, Marvin the Martian, he was trying to blow up Earth. Remember, he was trying to take Earth out. He had that big old cannon thing on that. He was trying to take Earth out, man. I guess it's not really funny, but I mean, it's definite food for thought on this. All right, and it's coordinations like that you can't make up. The last thing I thought for Jessica would do is be describing what happened on Mars, but it makes sense if you're dealing with a warlike species that destroyed their home world and they came and destroyed another with whoever they're feuding with or whatever's going on there. All right. So that's something I wanted to bring up. And this kind of connects, you know, that Shirlene Wallace had talked about seeing dark grays on that planet, on Mars, some type of dark beings, melanin dominant beings that look like grays. Okay. I myself have seen some non-humans that look gray. I should have put those pictures up. So one would be, please go back and, you know, I've had interaction with Andromedans, and one in particular, this experience on my YouTube channel. If you go under my personal experiences, it's called the Bio Bed, and that Bio Bed was this experience I had. There were the Andromedans in there, the little blue guys, and they said they were from one of the spiral arms of Andromeda, and there were some two melanin dominant beings in there. One of them, Mana. I've done a video over Mana. Okay, so I show that illustration there, and also another being that was some sort of medical being. I kept getting it was brown, and there's another one I've done called the Mother of the Hybrids. Check out the last of those videos. That'll be under my personal experiences also. She was extremely melanin dominant, but non-human. Okay. Anyway, I want to throw that out. Okay. But that came from, quote unquote, the big head scientist. And I think it's definitely worthy of noting. Okay. Another illustration I'll give of his, because I think he does actually really good work, honestly. May not agree with everything, but I'm kind of a Dr. Blair fan more than anything. But hey, oh, sorry. There's the button. I almost messed everything up by pressing the wrong button. Oh my God, that was close. You have no idea. That was so close to technical error. Okay, this one comes to the big head scientist also. And Yaqub representing the Ebenoid species, the breakaway civilization. There's another illustration. I probably won't pull that one up, but it shows you different Ebenoid tribes in the inner Earth. Okay. Well, heck, why not? Why not? I've actually got that one pulled up. Why not? It's important. Spirit's telling me to do it, and one thing I cannot do is not do what Spirit demands. There it is. And I think it's just important to show this because, it's all about the information here. And it's a little better than me just mumbling on and on and on. People say, my God, this really ain't doing nothing but rambling, which might be quite informative, but not pleasurable. Anyway, here you go right here. This is another one. This is the Ebenoid tribes in Inner Earth. Okay, that's what it represents anyway. And breakaway civilizations are so popular being talked about now in the disclosure community. But this brother was talking about that a long time ago. Just like kind of Admiral Byrd and all that was. But anyway, that's connected to that. And you have different tribes like this Sinuku tribe, and he will even connect to some of them that did different head bindings and things of that nature to mimic the gods. And then some of these tribes actually have still this larger head, and he talks about that. He makes the connection on that, in a way, and that's pretty cool in that way. So it's something worth everybody checking out because it's stuff that we don't hear about enough. Now, something I am going to tell you all right, I myself had an experience, and I've talked about the charters quite a bit, and how the charters show up about every 7 years for those of us that are lifetime contactees. It may be getting more frequently now, I think, but it was 7 years then. When I was 21, I got approached by an individual that I think was from the Inner Earth, one of these races. And I believe she had some type of a pheromone, and she was a telepath much stronger than I. And it was a unique experience, okay? And often we meet people that come up and approach us at places, hang out with us for a minute, say some badass stuff. Oh, excuse me, say some bad stuff, and it's like they just disappear. And the way this individual came through, I put up a shield because they were reading me too much, and they came through my shield. And I wasn't partying that night or nothing, so I should have been able to shield myself, but I couldn't. She was a much stronger telepath than I. She said her name was Andy, and I couldn't really place her ethnicity completely. So I said, I was like, what race are you? I remember saying, I'm of Black and Guatemalan descent. I mean, who do you know that even talks like that? Anyway, but that was when I was only 21, and she was so attractive. My younger nature was getting the better part of me, and I was having erogenous thoughts. So it was blocking some of this contact that was going on, I think. But she was reading me things like telling me about things about my sign. I never told her my sign, just other things. It was a fascinating encounter that lasted maybe 10, 15 minutes. You know what I mean? But I believe that she had that because the Inner Earth queens and the Inner Earth women are supposed to have high pheromones in a way that's kind of the way they demonstrate the dolmen of a lass on Star Trek, the original. Except she had to cry and they touched the tears, you'd be jacked. But they're supposed to have a type of a higher pheromone. And this is something that old girl talked about all the time that I no longer do work with. She claims she'd been in contact with them, and maybe not, but she had interesting information on some of the Andromedan females especially. So you can't always throw the baby out with the bathwater. Know what I'm saying? You feel me? Okay. Now we're getting through some of this. All right. Something else. This one here. And this is one that's been described to me that by more than just one person, right? And this is a type of brother that has been seen, and they say that they kind of dress. That's where the Moor thing comes up again, that they have a Moorish type of a dress. And I've had actually several people resonate with this. All right. There was a lady named Lamera that had communicated me earlier when I first came forward. And she had said that in England, maybe somewhere in Great Britain, was walking down the street, might have been London, I can't remember, Wales, I can't remember now, but had seen these two brothers walking by, and they were extremely tall, like extremely, like, you know, like 7 foot plus. And in that way, she thought that they were she said that the Globetrotters were in her town in England at that time. And so she thought, well, hey, they must just be Globetrotters walking down the street. And then she senses them telepathically and just says telepathically, welcome to Earth. And they stop and turn around. And they had some sort of communication with them before they walked on and she walked on telepathically. But she described them as looking like this, dressed like this, tall like this. And when I had posted this years ago, many people resonated with it. Okay. And when we start thinking about people like Norman Bergen, and I'll address that with him real quick, because look, I was guided when I was a kid. When I first started being able to ride my book to my bike to the library, it's only a couple blocks from where I lived. Okay, small blocks, and I at first I was trying to look up UFO type of stuff, but I know now I was getting guided to books. One of them then was somebody else is on the moon by oh gosh, what's that cat's name? Not it's not Ray Moody. Anyway, anybody could look that up. And another one was The Ring Makers of Saturn by Norman Bergen. And that one I couldn't understand quite as much because it dealt with a lot of telemetry. Okay. But when dealing with what he was saying, he's famous now for that interview he did with Carrie Cassidy, who has a bad reputation in the Black community for not wanting to talk about Black extraterrestrials. I've not really checked her out, so I don't know. Okay. But she's somebody, if she wants to talk to somebody about it, she can talk to me about it. If she wants to dispel some of that image. Okay. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But during that interview, he described as not these melanin dominant people coming from Saturn, but coming down in a shipyard. And when they got off, he said they were extremely tall Black men. And she said, "You mean brown?" He's like, "No," like he's all appalled. They were black. That's how he said it, though. I swear to God. Anyway, but like he's kind of all appalled or something. But you know, that's similar to, as Corey swore that Corey Good had told me also he had seen another type of brothers that he talks about in that video that were militant like, and they have weaponry, and they were real tall. And he said they'll come off of a ship and they'll be like, 20 of them come off with this weaponry, and they'll like just surround, and they're really impressive is what he was saying. He said that when first contact happens, he thought a lot of them would come and show themselves, and it's going to be hard for our general population to handle. He talked about that in that video. That one you need to go to my YouTube channel here. Please go to the Black Science playlist. And that video is on there for those of you that have not seen it. But going back to Norman Bergen, real quick. He just so everybody knows, I don't want to leave anything out. And this is his Ring Makers of Science, or excuse me, of Saturn book. So those that have not actually seen it. And that's exactly what the copy looked like when I found when I was a kid. It was this one. Now, something about this that I was good. Sorry, I probably fell off. Something about this that was a little easier for me to, at that time, to understand somebody else was on the moon, because he's talking about these tractor pictures and all this stuff that was going on in certain craters, like maybe Sinus Mati, something like that. But this one here, Bergen had quite a bit of telemetry in that book. And at that age, I had a hard time understanding the telemetry. And what he's saying in the telemetry is that there are these huge ships that are out there, and we're talking about miles and miles long, ships like 100 miles long, ships that are either mining or creating the rings. We're gonna go hard with one more. Yeah, here it is. Check this one out. This is one of the things that relates to his work, okay? Oh, uh-oh. Here you go. Right here. Okay, it's connected to Norman Bergen's work right here. He's saying that this infrared, this is this one by Hubble, but I think the ones who was it Voyager? Anyway, point being, this is supposed to be one of those objects that is out there either mining or creating the rings. But we know other things aid in the creating of the rings of Saturn, like for example, the moon Euclides. Euclides has these eruptions that they say spews particles and material into the space, and they believe that also aids into some of the rings as well. Okay, making some of the rings. Now, I don't think that's a joke, because I've talked to you guys before about these things I call pine cone spacecraft. These natural organisms that are in different galaxies, especially the galaxies that have large black holes in the middle. Like, look at the largest galaxy they ever found. That's what I was getting that information off of. And that these things are ejected from planets that are devoid of atmosphere to a degree. They get ejected, and what they do is they open up like pine cones, and they collect solar particles when they're near certain stars, and they close up and they go through more galactic, maybe universal transit. I don't know. But that's something that the star beings gave to me. All right. That's not just something Barry Littleton came up. Sometimes they download me, or they give me downloads, not where they communicate with me. I don't go on ships anymore, but they still give me information. You know what I mean? Actually, I don't know if that's even true now, because I'm starting to wonder about some of the dreams I've had recently. Anyway, this is just certain concerning Norman Bergen and what he was saying about Saturn. Okay, and we've all heard about the black cube of Saturn and all these other things that could go on and on and on. And something else I throw in with this also. When I'm talking about Saturn, I always think about, oh boy, Sun Ra. Sun Ra. My brother's a musician, and he's much older than me. He's about to be 70 here pretty quick. But I would go down, and look at some of his albums back when we still had albums, or 8 tracks, and he had Sun Ra down there. And Sun Ra used to come out on stage with these people laugh at him because he said he was part of the Galactic Federation. That's what he said. And he said that he came from Saturn, and that the hats he was wearing was representation of the moons around Saturn. And he said there were like tons of more moons that hadn't been discovered yet around Saturn. And that's very true. If you look at the amount of moons it had then compared to they've discovered now, it's like quadrupled. I can't tell you off mind how many moons it has. I want to say it has like 30 something. It's got a ton of them. Anyway, so that's just something that's interesting when it comes to Sun Ra. He wrote that one of his albums is "Space is the Place," but he was saying all that type of stuff. He was talking about all this extra being a space cat, and people laughed at him. But right now, maybe some of that merits more attention. You know what I'm saying? All right. Now, okay. Sorry, I'm looking at pictures. I wanted to make sure I showed you all the ones that were really needed to be shown. The others are not quite as important. You can look up the pictures of Corey Good's beings that he says he's seen. There's 2 of them. I know he's got others he called Anshar, and he said that they're like melanin dominant too. There's several pictures of him. I got some of his up, but anyway, let's keep going here. I had a regression I had done on a client, or a return client, repeat client, And that's a big video called The Black Reptilian. That's going to be in the Black Science section also of my channel. And that was a deal where the individual had described being in a type of a pyramid that they described having almost like a Vanta black on it to make it somewhat hidden. And that it was on a place that was outside of Egypt, somewhere in the Middle East, that's more of a vortex of alignment with the ley lines of the planet. And it was keeping that like in sync. And then they start describing being what I would say is a type of Essene or something in this pyramid and doing this work and how peaceful it was, but that they were learning too. And then they start mentioning that there are extraterrestrials walking around teaching people some. And I started asking, you know, what type? And they describe a couple of different types of like what we would call ebens. One of them, interestingly enough, being the one with the really hook nose, the big nose, like a represented at Holloman's Air Force Base, have the wrap around their head, the headdress, and a really big nose. And I mentioned before, you know, I'm still looking for that interview with Betty Hill. So many are coming up with her recently. It's interesting, but this one where she says the leader of the Greys on that ship had a nose like Jimmy Durante, who's known as the Snoz. Okay, look at that guy, had a big old nose, but she said he had a nose like that. And that's a certain type of Eben that's supposed to be higher than the clone type of Greys that we know of. I don't think they're prime intelligent, but maybe they are. I don't know for those beings. Anyway, she described they describe beings like that in this place. Okay, but then they start saying, but you know, and then there's the other that this whole place is kind of about. But they stay in the back in the zero part of the pyramid. And then they start describing basically a zero room. And it's a trip because, you know, I use science fiction. I get Spirit will use that too. I start seeing something when Tom Baker regenerated as Doctor Who. Actually, he became Peter Davidson. Very painful for me at that age, but he turned into Peter Davidson, and Peter Davidson, the regeneration didn't go well. He had to be put something in the TARDIS called a zero room that they said smelled like flowers, but it was a place where there were no outside particles of energy of any type. And he was to be in there regenerating there. They even broke it down and made it into like a zero cabinet they put him in. So anyway, just that's the way that this part of this pyramid was described, and that this being stayed back there. Then they described this being melanin dominant and being a reptilian. And they were even describing the face of this individual having quite a bit humanoid face, but certain characteristics that were undistinguishably reptilian. And then they start saying, you know, this being is not exiled from their planet, but is in hiding from their planet. They start describing a planet that's kind of outside and almost in like an e-space outside of our normal continuum of universe. Maybe from another universe. This comes up sometimes, see? But that they're hiding here because what they're capable of doing is focusing thought in a way that makes it material. And in that way, they can actually destroy negative civilizations by thinking about them. And I mentioned before on Jessica's show and other places that it reminded me of another Star Trek episode called The Survivors, Star Trek The Next Generation. And the old man used to be on the Rifleman. He called himself a Dowd, a being of delusion or illusions and false surroundings from another galaxy, an immortal being. And it was masquerading as a person and married this woman. And the woman went to war when this hostile species came and she died. It destroyed that entire colony. And when he found her dead, he said he leashed out and he destroyed them. And they're like, that's what you didn't want us to know, the Priest of Enterprise, Picard, that you destroyed that ship. And he kind of looked up, he said, man, you don't get it. I didn't just destroy that ship or 1 or 100 or 1,000. He looked up at him, he said, I destroyed them all. They were called Ushnak. He said, all Ushnak everywhere. And, you know, and that took it to another level where Picard's like, well, let's go ahead and let you beam back down there and have your fantasies of dancing with your fantasy wife and all that stuff, man. And he put like a quarantine on that place. Leave him alone. But that's the type of situation. And what the client was saying, why this being was on Earth, we weren't having negative extraterrestrials coming. There was deep in the distance. I was asking why. Well, because he might start thinking about them and they'll be over. And it was taking everything to just a whole nother level. They were saying he's like the way our greatest religious figures on this planet are regarded on his planet. But for that reason, they want to kill him. And he's being hunted. And this is the only place for certain reasons in that pyramid on this planet. He was invisible to other civilizations. Not all of them, but those that knew wouldn't come here because they didn't want him to think about them. So that's just something else I want to throw in. So that's people asked me after that video, was it a positive being? Well, God, did you not listen to anything I said? You know what I mean? He was a negative species wouldn't come here because he was here. And that's something that, when you start going, I don't make the rules. I have to accept what the client has experienced. That is something their immortal soul had recorded, one of their lives here. All their other lives were like being a warrior. And they're carrying a lot of trauma from the deaths from those lives. But this was a life of respite. Their soul spirit said before it incarnated, they wanted a life of respite. And they incarnated was involved in that. So anyway, it's one of those more things for you to think about. All right. Oh, not bad. My gosh, I'm actually almost done, I think. Praying black mantis. Oh, another thing about that, something that kind of reminded me of that with them having the extra joint. The movie The Arrival, not the second one, but the very first one from the 90s, the movie Arrival with Charlie Sheen. There's a brother that's running around with him most of the time. And at the end, he rounds up being one of them, and he turns his legs backwards and runs off in the desert. I think all that is, representative again of what we're dealing with here. Oh, one last thing, and I'm done. I'll look into the chat and talk, and we'll get out of here after a while. Well, I'll do the chat first, but one other thing. Okay, so when dealing with melanin-dominant beings that have been here, something that no one talks about, some are now, but believe you're going to hear it. It started here first. You probably heard it, and that's the Triangulum Galaxy. You've got Andromeda, you've got Earth, and you've got the Triangulum Galaxy. Here, one more. Screw it. One more. It's good for that. Boom, there we go. Oh. Oh, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. Oh, it's almost another choke out there. God, it was too close for comfort. I didn't like that. Actually, I did like that TV show, Too Close for Comfort. It wasn't too bad. Ted Knight. Anyway, all right, Triangulum Galaxy. Now, this is a galaxy that is going to merge with both the Milky Way and Andromeda. And it's one we don't hear about a lot, okay? And when we start dealing, with some of these beings that were 25 feet and taller, these giants, these melanin-dominant black giants, some of them came from here. And sometimes we're seeing the triangle and the pyramid illustration, it's not always about Orion. Sometimes it's about Triangulum. Okay, and these beings, and we start talking about beings that were huge like that, and that were based on like gold ornaments and things like that they had in their blood to a large degree, and you start dealing with the large sanitation facilities that they had, okay, and that they were like sometime now, they said those are sometimes now rare mineral deposits now that can be found around the planet. It's very interesting, like things like what their urine and what their feces actually were with that gold material and that high energy metals. Whole nother thing going on there. But anyway, Triangulum is one that doesn't come up enough at all. I think the rare time that I saw Triangulum coming up was in a Star Trek Next Generation called, where it's one of the first season, called Where No One Has Gone Before. And that cat that's been in all those shows, he's dead now. He played Monk's monk's therapist. He came on board and he had this cat with him that was the Traveler. And the Traveler took them like beyond warp like 1000, and they wound up being in Triangulum, in an M33 Triangulum, and they were showing where actually space and matter weren't the separate things that they are in our galaxy, in our part of the our galaxy. It was quite interesting, but that's the only time I've seen Triangulum brought up. But anyway, when you start dealing with these huge beings that were over 25 feet tall, that were melanin dominant, and others, sometimes I wonder how much this takes us into things like Lord Hanneman, and how in all those texts, though, you have those race of beings over here that were all 25 feet taller. He was jumping around mountains and those huge footprints and things like that. And I can even transfer this over to, what we talked. I've done a video about Adam and Eve. Now, they weren't from here, but they were giants too, and all that stuff, more than just Gilgamesh were giants. Anyway, so that's just another thing to bring up, and understanding that when we hear so much about contact experiences of beings that are from our local neighborhood. We've heard a lot about, melanin dominant beings, BETs from Sirius. BET, I've heard from Cassiopeia. There's some out there. Okay, but Sirius is a big one, and that comes a lot from the doggone. But when you really look into what the doggone were saying, they said that the Nomo, a lot of them were blue, and that there were another smaller blue beings that came here that when it rained, or that when the firmament fell, they got trapped here, and that the solar radiation turned them into more melanin dominant black, of extremely dark black. So that's kind of what was saying that when it comes to doggone. But those are all places around our, place that we know now, like Sirius, or of course everybody talks about Lyra now. Like all of a sudden, all feline beings come from Lyra. I just love, however, that just got woven in there somehow. But that's just no other thing. So I just want to bring that up, okay? When dealing with some of these other species that have come to this planet, that dealing with pyramids and dealing with triangles and dealing with other different melanin dominant species. Triangulum is one that should be not dismissed. Cool. I think that's about really what I wanted to present. And this was more about some of the people that I've talked to, experiences. Oh, I know. One more thing. We start going into melanin dominant beings. Let's not forget radiotropic fungus found on the walls of Chernobyl and Fukushima that is converting gamma radiation into the growth cycle. And I mentioned before how I've had scientists, I know that's what they were, but they send me these emails, they like disappear. But they said that they thought that was possibly sit here from like type 3, 4 civilization that's on not just the nano, but on the pico. And we start dealing, that take us into fungal components, all right? The fungal components and the bacterial components. Somebody tried to mock me recently when I was talking about Lambda phage and said I was talking about the race memory. No, it's not what that is. Okay, it's a totally different thing. But when we start dealing with the phage lambda and other bacterias, viral and fungal, that are on this planet that are undiscovered, we must look what is scientifically proven, called the deep biosphere. And within the deep biosphere, you have something called microbial dark matter. Look it up. Microbial dark matter. More matter that's using melanin for all sorts of things. And not just that, the deep biosphere contains like 95 or more % of Earth's undiscovered bacteria, Earth's undiscovered fungal. Okay, when you start dealing with that, is there something much more powerful that we could access that's more powerful than the phage lambda that's talked about in the ISIS thesis by Judy K. King, quite brilliant, okay? We could actually trigger to actually regenerate the Earth coming from the deep biosphere. A whole nother level that could be maybe triggered by psychokinetic energy, maybe sound, maybe gamma radiation, who knows? But this is something we should be looking about when it comes about regenerating our planet. Other things that might be able to be done. And I've mentioned before, when you start seeing some of these organic craft going into the ground. Some of them are going into the deep biosphere to symbiotically connect with the planet. Whole nother thing going on, a whole nother level when you start looking at symbiosis amongst organic creatures. I've said before the connection between the mushrooms and the trees, how some of these ships use the trees, how Sasquatch using the trees. That's becoming almost old, repeat information for me now. Anyway, that's most of everything. So let's go through the chat real quick, just answering a few things, see what's going down. Auntie Aaron, thank you for being here. Candy Wolf, thank you for being here. Seen a few new people in here. Right on. OM33, thanks for coming. I'm back up to about what, 424? I'll go to about 410. Let's see. Corey Good is possessed. I don't care. I'm not into that. Hai Chong International 6348. I heard all sorts of stuff, and I mentioned at the beginning, I don't like the bureaucracy that surrounds those cats, but I felt Artron energy on him, so that means he's a contactee, and I have to accept that first. I don't care what you say about that. And certain things about his testimony I wanted to know, about black extraterrestrials especially. And number two, like, he was talking me to death, so he constantly, so I was like, yeah, there's that picture of that white Draco with the wings and the dude in the suit. Is that you? And he's like, yeah. And I was watching his micro expressions. I want to know about the experience. So sometimes you can't always throw the bathwater out with the baby with the bathwater. So that's why I bring that up. So I'm more interested in getting the information, especially concerning that, and trying to decipher and discern where the reality is with what I've talked about with other contactees that have experienced melanin dominant people. So that's why I kind of say that there. Sometimes it's not always about putting people down. Sometimes it's about learning stuff. Saturn, Lord of the Rings. Dr. Greer. Well, he's getting a lot of attention these days, isn't he? Humongous snout. Bet she's talking about Jimmy Durante. Kind of interesting. I don't see many of the grays outside of Holloman Base described as looking like that with the really big nose. But there's a point where we need to really be looking for who are the prime intelligence when it comes to all those grays and stuff. Janeway was underrated. She went hard like Cisco. That's OM33. Janeway, the first couple of seasons honestly got on my nerves because for me, it's like I was watching on Golden Pond in space. She was like Audrey Hepburn in space as the captain. But then there's the episode they had with the two-parter with, was it Captain Ransom, where they were putting those beings into the stasis field and draining their life energy for transwarp propulsion or whatever. Man, and how he betrayed her and the entire Voyager crew. Man, she went hard. I remember when she locked him in the thing, and Chakotay was saying, "Let him out," and she's looking at, "As you were, he's gonna break." I mean, she changed that episode throughout the rest of the series. To me, she got much more, less Picard-like and a little bit more Cisco-like. And Cisco, yeah, he was probably my favorite. I mean, I liked all the captains, but Cisco is probably my favorite. I don't care what nobody says. Almost nowhere on television had you ever seen the love expressed between a black father and his black son the way you did on that show, period. That were the first ones to do that. And there's the other one where he wrote the script and stuff where he was time traveling and tripping out and stuff. That's another good one. Anyway, but I agree. She got better as time went on, but I was more of a 7 or 9 fan. Neon green light during contact. No, I really don't, to be honest. A lot of times when it comes to light, for me, it's a soul group thing. But I can't say I really have heard that. I wouldn't trust neon green, but it might be subjective. I don't know. Is it neon green uniforms, or are they like wielding neon green light, or Starcraft manages our genetic DNA weavers for the swarm? Starcraft, is that a video game or one of those like reality game, one of those games or something? I'm not sorry, I'm not real hip on the games these days. I'm still back on regular Nintendo. What was it? Mario Brothers, and what was the other one? Like the one they jumped through the thing. God, not Commodore. What was it called? Contra. Oh, Contra. Very cool. Because everybody's kind of just talking amongst themselves. Is there any reason you would not be able to give someone a past life regression? Yeah, I mean, some people just don't hypnotize good. And it's normally because, they can't let go. That's why I learned hypnosis because I was trying to self hypnotize myself so I could get these memories from the missing time. And I couldn't do it. I could put other people's under like that. But for me, I wasn't able to do it. I had to go sit and build a rapport with somebody else and let them actually take me under because I'm a control freak. Couldn't let go. You know what I mean? Until I actually underwent the process. Then you realize when you connect with your superconscious and your subconscious fully, that you actually have more control than you've ever had before. And it's who you really are. And it's a shame we're not like that all the time. So that would be one thing. Is somebody, so somebody that just can't. And there's something else. I've met somebody that has, oh gosh, I believe it's called aphantasia, and that's where they cannot make any images in their mind, and that makes for a difficult induction because they can't do any type of mental imagery. So you have to use other things that are a way to kind of activate the subconscious mind to pass the conscious mind to actually key in certain things. It can be done, but it's just kind of difficult. So those are the symptoms there. It's kind of a bit harder to hypnotize people like that, and just restless minds and things like that. So I mean, a lot of time you get past a lot of that, but there's certain things that, or it could be chemical balance things, problems that just make it very difficult. It could be, or a mental disorder of some type, mental illness can make it more difficult. So not everybody is good subjects, but most people, I mean, even those that everyone that says they can't be hypnotized, they can though. But the point for me is that it's not about just can they be hypnotized, but do they go deep enough for it to be therapeutic? That's why I dislike stage hypnosis. That's why I dislike party hypnosis, and why I won't do like public regressions like on YouTube on video or something, because that stuff starts coming out. It's not a party, and it's not always for everybody to see. Somebody starts crying like an earthbound spirit release. These people start feeling what this person that died is within them. And the amount of tears and breakdowns I see during earthbound spirit release, I can't count to you. It happens all the time. And more than that, it's just been draining this person and ruining their life for some time. That's why I'm real particular about the earthbound thing, and about the whole crossing thing. That was a great question, Ernest. Thank you. Why is all knowledge so unknown? Do some giants come from planets with less gravity? Well, that's a good question. That's a good question. I would almost think they kind of come with more, and that'd be why they have size like that. But I don't know. That's a good question. That book, The Science of Superman, if he had really the density that they're saying scientifically, like his first step, he would have start sinking down to the center of the earth with that type of density. So thus he has control of his gravitons. And they haven't fully proved gravitons yet, but I think they're real. And I think Sasquatch has access to them and controlling them to a certain degree. And I think that might be why they're just seem to be even more fast than the humanoid form should be able to do. You know what I mean? Just food for thought on that. I'm not saying it's correct, but it's worth thinking of. So yeah, that's interesting. It could get bigger or something else. It could be a gravity thing, but it's a fascinating thought. When Crusher's son used to learn to travel beyond where using his thoughts. That one wasn't where no one has gone before. That was just before he left, when he stopped the space-time continuum and the traveler came back. And if you go into the Picard series, all I'll say is without spoiling it, Wesley went further on into his life doing that as a career or whatever, with the traveler type of thing, which kind of gave a cool spin to the Picard series. Oh, sorry. Ooh. Yeah, there he goes. I remember the. Oh, sorry. Rymai Skywatcher. Yeah, they brought him back a couple of times. Yeah, he was a pretty good character. Where was he from? Tal Ceti. He's from Tal Ceti, wasn't he? Tal Ceti something he was from, wasn't he? Oh wow, I never thought about that till now. All right. No, he was from Tau Alpha C. Tau Alpha C. A lot of different beings on Sirius. Well, mainly you hear mostly about the melanin dominant ones and the Nomo aquatic amphibious type beings are the ones that are most recorded from there. But I mean, there's tons of types of beings everywhere. Everywhere there's exoplanets, you've got beings. Baking cookies, that's cool. Y'all talking about cookies, man. Our bodies have more fungus and bacteria and whatever microbial cells than our own cells. We create something called the microcloud. The microcloud extends about, what is it? I think it's 14 inches outside of our body, outside our physical body. And it's absolutely consumed with all those dead cells. But that's also where you start going into things that are decoded DNA, non-coded DNA, which is mostly viral and bacterial. And everybody, that's what it's dealing with when you deal with isosthesis and stuff like that. You think viral, oh, they're all going to be negative. But some of these things, like the lambda-phage, if you can take it from the lysistic reproduction cycle into the lysis reproduction cycle, it's a whole other thing going on when it starts replicating. And that's what the Egyptians were trying to do with the mummification. So it's pretty interesting when you start looking at stuff like that. I think it's one of her really good theories. Fungus in Chernobyl nuclear reactors use the melanite radiation. It's called radiotropic fungus, and it's been found on Chernobyl and also Fukushima. And I was just comparing that to dark microbial matter that is inside the deep biosphere of the Earth. I urge everybody to look that stuff up. Reptilian beings, black reptilian beings. Yeah, I did. I won't go over that one again. Sorry, but there's a video on my. If you go to my playlist and check out melanin and black science, and there's a video on there called the Black Reptilian. That's a regression I had done. That individual talked about a black reptilian that was quite remarkable. And I've heard others too that have described some as being one of the Earth subterranean reptilian species being somewhat melanin dominant too. What I'd heard anyway. So. I'm at 431. I'm kind of going quick up. I love mushrooms and trip. Book for Dorf, right? Oh yeah, me too, man. Awesome information. Sunfire Goddess, thanks for being here. Hello, Tamara. Glad you can make it. Auntie Erin, what's happening? Oh, whoa. Oh, this doesn't let me do it, does it? Oh, it does. Sorry. I should have been doing that. Oh, I forgot I could do that. See? I'm still impaired today. Still a little bit off. Sorry, everybody. I forgot I could do that. Oh, interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Donnie. See, it's more common than we would think. You know, something else I'll mention, like there was I've somebody associated with a friend. His name is Zach Zach Jefferson, and he had written a letter to Little Moulton Howe, emailed her, and asked like, how come she only talks about the tall whites and never says anything about any extraterrestrial melanin dominant black extraterrestrials? And she gave him the same excuse Ray Hernandez gave me, which is, oh, I never heard anybody talk about them. I never get any information like that. Oh, so as a journalist, I just have to stick to that, what I get, the information I get. And I got to say, I don't know how much that flies with me. Is because I've had so many people now, when I reached out and stuck my neck out. Okay. One is when I first came forward, I got some harassment from Caucasian people. I got harassment from these cats trying to be guardians of like the gatekeepers of the black community. And they came forward to me first. I mean, like right after I came forward. And then later on, it winds up not going right because they got some issues. And they start saying issues. Well, don't like it. They ask me all these questions. We don't like it because we've seen you interacting with contactees that are not melanin dominant. And the other thing was, and we've also seen you, you only mention melanin sometimes. You should be doing numbers about melanin all the time. Those two things, all right. And then the other one was when I started talking about Black Dot Theory and the work of Dr. Richard King and the African biological. He wrote the book, the Origin of African Biological Psychiatry. And I do believe I had that book up here. Oh, what do you know? Right here by Dr. Richard King. Okay, really good book from the 90s. And this book, he talks about Black Dot Theory that is based on the Eye of Horus and certain breathing techniques and certain visualization techniques that can be used to awaken the race memory. Okay, that's which is also it's really fascinating concept the way he presents it. But they said I was giving away ancestral secrets. And so I got into it with these cats. I don't know if I seem like a pushover on YouTube or not, but I'm not. And boom. Yeah, so deals like that comes up a lot. Those individuals, now they're putting out no work anymore. They're not saying nothing. They're not helping anything. But right now, somebody had to come put their head on the guillotine, so I did. All right, and I've been blessed enough that I've had friends of all sorts of different cultures, races, brothers, white people, Hispanics, Asians, and it's great to get a little multicultural exposure. And one of the best things about it, and the easiest way is that you get to share some food. Great way to get to learn another culture and a great experience. I think that's cool. And for that reason, I put myself out here in these circles and this stuff because it makes somebody that might look like me say, well, you did it, I can do it. And I've noticed, like I talked about with Jimmy the other day at those conferences, I'm starting to see more brothers and ethnic people are starting to show up at these conferences. More are starting to be in these circles. And that's where we bring things together. Like things like I've always wanted to know, for example, as a contactee. I had heard back in the 90s that from my friend Farouk and Askia, they talked about a lot that as melanin dominant, we didn't go through the same sterilization procedure that melanin recessive people do in terms of we don't go through the sterilization. So when I put out some videos asking about it's 2 videos about stasis fields, an interesting entering craft. All right, and what color was the beam that took you in? Was it a purple beam? Because a purple beam was supposed to be more of a sterilization ultraviolet, okay? Or was it a blue beam? We might have plutonia type of uranium radiation component. You know, and just so it's things like that. I wanted to wonder, like supposedly no brothers ever got the purple ultraviolet sterilization beam. That's not true. It's things like that I found out. But if you don't talk to each other, you won't never find that stuff out. You know what I mean? Or even be aware of it. And it's interesting to know, like, for example, I want to know, I had not heard about really black people being abducted by Greys. I just couldn't find information on that outside of Betty Barney Hill. Very rare could I find that. And then I discovered the work of Credo. And Credo talks about being abducted by Greys and calls the Greys, was it Mandingos, the torturer of men? Now, he described his abduction being identical to missing 411 and his return being just like 411, being dropped, being disoriented, being without his boots, all this stuff. It was uncanny, you know. So when he talks about that, and he was talking about how he was in a facility, much like what Jessica saw in his underground laboratory, and he sees other being experimented on there, or not experimented. He kept calling it torture. And he said he kept felt from these Greys this type of pleasure they were getting from it. And he went in on why some of them can move around down here without suits, that they're us from the future. So, you know, stuff like this, but we got to talk to each other to get down to this to make the true tapestry. You know what I mean? Anyway, I'm about to get out of here, everybody. I'll take a few more things down here. Seriously, though, Sun Ra is worth listening to. Yeah, he's an interesting brother. He's an interesting brother. You know, he was talking about, Sun Ra was talking about that stuff before even a video. I'm probably going to eventually do a video. People are asking me to do another movie review. Can't believe it. I probably might do it over The Brother from Another Planet with Joe Morton from, I think it was 1983, I think. But that's a good movie. A really good movie in terms of those that have watched. I don't want to spoil it from anybody, but watch the very last scene. Very last scene when the brother looks at him. You talking about the breakaway civilizations there from an extra solar place. Anyway, food for thought. Susan, thanks for coming. Ascent, thank you for being here. Do you know anything? I am, I'm mispronouncing names. 435. Oh, I forgot. Sorry, I can do this. Sorry, I'm getting used to this. Do you think universal codes, eyes and nose? You know, it's interesting because when you start looking at the binary that they're saying about the black holes themselves and about the universe, is that it comes in binary. And when you start dealing with what is the black holes, which are actually called MACOs, magnetically turning collapsing objects, all right, that when you actually go through one of the black holes, it creates a copy on the surface called the quantum hologram. And the quantum hologram goes into the MACO as part of the mechanism that holds the information. So that makes the MACOs, the black holes, the Akashic records, the knowledge, the hardware of the universe, actually, is what there would be in that way. Okay, so when dealing with this quantum hologram, I have heard some interpret that in a way that comes of ones and zeros. And that's fascinating because the MACOs themselves function on what's called quantum waves, conscious waves, sometimes quantum conscious waves. But though they occur spirically and helically, helical and spherical, okay? And we have the microtubules of the brain that are spherical that can actually connect with the MACOs in that way through the thought form, through the thought process. And when you start dealing with the quantum hologram and those civilizations that may not exist anymore, they're going to be using that binary code somewhere within that quantum hologram. That might be what you're picking up. And remembering that those quantum holograms and those MACOs are also microscopic or on the micro level as well, attached to our molecules. So there's plenty of that information out there. and how much that does with not just the electric universe, but also the holographic universe, that whole part of the quantum hologram. That would be my answer to that. Don't mean it's right, but oh. Bigfoot door. Ones and O's in the Matrix. Yeah, I think we're getting a little too close to the Matrix. Right now I've been watching a lot of even more of the work Jesse Beltran, everybody's doing with the non-linear journey junction detectors, and with all that material. And what that was is something that would sweep rooms for wires. But now they're using it to actually pinpoint radio frequencies and things being emitted from people. And you've got the dream engineering going on right now, and that's becoming so strong. I have people talking now like their dreams are that's just a real experience, and they're talking about it like it's just as real as this here, But in reality, when you start dealing with digital twin cyborgs and the uploading of consciousness into one of those cyborgs, it's going to be done in a fashion that is similar to dream engineering, turning dreams into memories and those memories into reality. That's what that technology does. And the fact we have no neurocognitive law means we're all prey to it. Okay, it's a big deal, and I think needs to be really, really taken serious. Right on. I'm kind of a golden Star Trek person myself. It took a while for Enterprise to grow on me, but eventually did. It's pretty good too. But I like Voyager. I like pretty much all of them. I have not gotten into the newer ones though, outside the Picard series. And Jimmy was saying that they were really good the other night, so I need to check them out. He kept talking about something about Center Seat. He kept saying, check out Center Seat. No, I'm not seeing that, Auntie Erin. I'm sorry. I remember that old video, The Speed of Light, though. That was fun. Contra, there you go. Alpha and Omega. What a great chat, everybody. Thank you all. Science fiction or science reality? Yeah. Wow. Great chat, everybody. I appreciate all you coming here. And I'm sorry it took me so long to get here. That's why I'm just going a few minutes later here, just because everybody waited so patiently for me. Mushroom spores are really dark and defend against radiation like melanin. That's right. OM33. Correct. Everybody, I got dogged out for talking about mushroom, the component of them that was involved with the craft I was involved with. But here, that right there. Sorry, but that very, very, very much so. And it's people don't laugh as much now because when NASA announced that they're going to start making those mycelium housing on Mars because of the way it can actually defend against solar radiation. More than that, look at the new defense shield they're trying to make for the International Space Station, if it's still functioning, and that other space station too. They're trying to make an actual mycelium defense shield that will absorb all that radiation, all that stuff. See, that's taking it to another level because Rupert Sheldrake and Terence McKenna have been talking for a long time how the mushroom spore is actually impervious to solar radiation and is capable of interstellar travel. Thus, you've got your psilocybin that comes and joins symbiotically with the nervous system of the planet and gets in our nervous system too and eat them. So yeah, cool. Thank you for that. You're very right. That stuff anybody can look up. The new radiation shield they're trying to make. Talking about his science ball being dropped. I think the science fairs are kind of cool. I've always liked them, Wow. I took some edibles a month ago, and a space lady, a darker skin, more melanin appeared in my third eye and said, "Welcome to the golden age." So that's the gummies, huh? I've mentioned before. I had experiencing watching that new Flash movie on edibles. I won't do that again, so I'm all right on those, man. I'll sit up there dozing off, man. That cat's name is Barry. He's yelling at himself because he went back in town to run with himself. It's like nobody was in the theater at all. Like two people. I mean, nobody. It's that guy and his daughter way over there. So I start drifting off because that damn gummy. And then he'll be when they're not blowing something up. It's just a terrible movie. I start dozing off. All of a sudden, Barry, pay attention. I mean, oh, but he's yelling at himself. You know what I mean? So it's like somebody's talking to me. So I'm cool with the gummy. So definitely will not take one of those. What? Yeah, it's just one, but I'm good, man. That was a rough movie. Anyway, the only other black contactee disappeared from YouTube. Who are they? You still got Flurburn and some others. Flurburn actually, or Dell, her real name, she did 2 Melanin Dominant conferences. I spoke at both of them. Other good presenters there too, like Ada that had a thing about the dreadlocks, and it's really good presenter she gave. And she spent a lot of time with Dr. Dr. Blair before he died. So, yeah. Hey, bringing new things to us. Hey, thank you. I try. Some things, everything gets so cookie cutter. You know what I mean? Like I wonder why sometimes people that say they're getting all this information from star beings, how come they're not talking about the Fermi bubbles? Another video of mine, look up the Fermi bubbles and how I think that's used with Alcibarri warp drive, changing that to this instantaneous transport system throughout the entire cosmos. So the Fermi bubbles. I don't hear any of those people talking about that. Is they don't care. They're not getting that type of information from the star beings. And it's not about who's right or wrong. It's just about what we've experienced. You know what I mean? I'll tell you something else Jimmy had mentioned, and I had not heard it yet. That is that they had the samples from asteroid Bennu that contain RNA and DNA of human, and it's like almost going into the panspermia thing. He was laughing what Richard Hoagland had said about the electron microscope, there being these type of gears and that stuff too. I think he dismissed that too easy and hasn't really looked into it and what Hoagland was saying about that. But I think that guy may have died. I don't see him around on anything anymore. And I can't find that where he was talking about that stuff. Anyway, but I did. So I had not heard that yet. I did look that up. They did find the different RNA and different things on Astro Bennu. But why are they sending anything there? Not just to mine. I think, what we're dealing with, are we dealing with ancient derelict spacecraft that are in the solar system? Everybody's tripping on Atlas 3I, which I'm so sick about hearing about. But nobody's talking about the stuff that's already here, outside of maybe the Black Knight, which can't be proven like these other objects like CG99, SKG 3444. What's the one? H2O something, that other one that's close to the moon out there. Those are the ones we should really be looking at. And they've been out there for a while. Oh, what a great question. Are the Mako similar to tachyons from the Red Dwarf show? I have not seen the Red Dwarf show, but the tachyons are actually faster than light particles, which is so funny when you start people arguing because they've not been discovered yet. But still, I think when you start dealing with actually going through the Mako itself, you're going to get through the wormhole itself faster than light travel itself. And I would think the tachyons would actually exist maybe within the Mako itself for the passing through. When you come through the outside the other Mako, that's supposed to technically be the exiting aperture is supposed to be the white hole, correct? And it's things like, I wonder, when we're dealing with that concept, like a lot of people that will get these attachments that are especially demonic, they get them around these portals and things, these so these places that have portals. And it makes you wonder, when you have negative entities like that coming out of them here, where is the entry aperture? What realm? What level? I probably care to not find out, eh? Big head scientist is Dr. York. Yeah, I thought so. I knew it was either Dr. York or Dr. Valentine. And I'll be honest, much respect to those brothers, but I don't worship their work the way some of our fellow and melanin dominant people do. To me, they're just contactees like me that came forward. You know what I mean? But as far as sometimes people do things that put them on a pedestal, it's like, you know, or Dr. Valentine. I think it's Dr. York. But it's some good information there. So like I said, but Dr. Blair was really on it. Yeah, that's what Jimmy says. Yeah, I kind of went through the dreadlock thing, Donna, at the beginning. Maybe go back to the beginning. I talked a lot about the Andromedan females with the dreadlocks, and they're androgynous, similar to Bacterianians from that Michael Desmarques's book. That's kind of going to be towards the beginning. So you go back, you better check that out. We talked about that a little bit. And how they're illustrated in many different things, especially the predator, which is interesting because you always think that the predator is supposed to be a reptilian. After the first one, the skin and things you would think, but you look at the sketches from Winston and others. Actually, those mandibles, they're insectoid. I think you're dealing with something totally different when it was the Yatiju or however Yatuja, Yatuja, right? I think that's how it's spelled. Vortex energy. A vortex is actually just swirling energy, is all that actually is. When dealing with the Mako, it's magnetically eternally collapsing objects. You're dealing with the quantum hologram. You're also dealing with the fact that it operates similar to brain waves. That's what I was mentioning earlier. So, it's but vortex energy kind of it can just mean swirling energy. That can be a whirlpool. That can be one of those things in the forest that Tom Powell says never go into. You know what I mean? But the Mako, when you're dealing with that, the vortex part of that is going to be the swirling accretion disk, okay, which you can actually see. But the Mako itself, the mechanism that holds the information inside, it wraps around too in that type of a way. So the outer part of the Mako is going to be the beginning of the universe. The inner part of it's going to be current. Okay, so that's kind of the way we would deal with that if you want to mean as far as vortex energy, connecting that to the Makos. And that takes us to something like Rudy Seal talked about a lot about magnetars and kind of how that's a function to where when going to also being a Mako and forming that when the star collapsed, they create these magnetars. So stuff like that. But then again, I'm not an astrophysicist, so I ain't gonna go too far out of my lane, man. I might get jacked, like Homeboy mentioned earlier. Do you remember let's see. Yeah, very much so. They represented that in Smallville too, in a cave. He'd go into a cave, and that cave was a boom tube. I believe Batman would never use them. He said he didn't like no boom tubes. Yeah. He always said for the back plane. But yeah, I thought that's a good representation too. Thank you, Susan. Yeah, I was a Smallville fan. Tell you what, Susan, I watched on Smallville. There's there's two of them. One is Lex, Michael Rosenbaum. He does two shows. One of them is called Inside of Me, Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum, and the other one is called Talkville. On Talkville, him, Tom Welling, and this other cat, they have guests on sometimes, have going through every episode of Smallville. So that's kind of cool. But on Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum, last week he had Allison Mack on there. Chloe, she's been released and all that. The first only interview I guess she's done. It was very interesting. It's like an hour and something long. Check that out. Michael Rosenbaum, Inside of You with Allison Mack. I've been wondering because that's an interesting, whole deal that happened to her. Most unfortunate, but sometimes we dig our own graves, Anyway, I think that's it. All right, I'm up to 5:10 right now. Thank you all for being here. And Jessica's still here. Thank you for being here. Hopefully I referenced everything correct. Please go back and look at those shows that I mentioned. The ones over Mars, the one over Tau Ceti. Fascinating episodes. You know what I mean? And it all kind of connects to a degree. And of course, are there other beings on Mars? We have reported now, we have 2 different times of melanin dominant, the Olmecs, these Tau Ceti beings. Well, I've seen 2 different representations of insectoids that live there, mantis and some type of ant being. And also we've seen what's that other one that it's like some type of a creature looking thing or something. But so those are the ones that I've heard about on Mars. I'm sure there's more there than that, but who knows? And even more interesting on Jessica's data and on that episode, check out what she says about a jump room being down there in the inner Mars. She's describing a room to me that sounds like the original room they back engineered to create jump rooms. I mean, it's fascinating. You can't make that type of stuff up, especially if she doesn't know what she's looking at. You know what I mean? And for all I know, it could be just, all the stuff we hear is BS and it's just some sand and dirt she's looking at. But that's not what came out of that at all. So. Very cool, Susan. Thank you for sharing that. My brothers had communication with brothers that were a musician, but they appeared to have, some of them he said had freckles, but they were black with the red and blonde hair, like the cats from Panama. And there were these musicians that were interacting with him. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I want to thank again everybody for being here. I got everybody done on chat. Thank you all for being here. It still went a little bit longer than I thought, but it was a good one. And this was done, okay, not to give the name of every melanin dominant extraterrestrial species. It's done just to inspire you to do your own research, to inspire more people to come forward. Okay, it's not about me, it's about the information. All right, so hopefully that went over good and you've got some things to look up, some things to research. And in that way, knowledge is power. And it's about us really trying to transition into a type 1 civilization without being a slave civilization like Jessica saw on TRAPPIST-1. We don't want that. So anyway, I thank you all for being here. I'll probably come back next week. I want to thank especially the people from Patreon. That's the only reason I'm still here, and I got to start doing more with them. I had a family member that got hurt, and I took a couple of days off to deal with that. So I'm about 4 days behind on emails, 5 almost. Somebody got mad at me earlier today. But I'm trying to get everybody back and set up more appointments to do sessions. I just couldn't for about almost a week, and I fell behind on everything. So I apologize if you're somebody that didn't hear from me. You probably will tonight. I appreciate you all being here. You can email me at barrylittleton13@gmail.com. Please hit the subscribe button. I like to make it like 13,000 subscribers or 14, I think it is. That'd be cool. Then maybe I'll get I'll be like the level. That'll be the cutoff level I have to achieve. Anyway, please subscribe. Thank you all for being here and have a good Sunday evening. Peace.